The message begins with an urgent spiritual call directed to the chosen one, a call that refuses to wait politely at the door of ordinary life. It arrives with a sense of immediacy, like a knock that echoes through the quiet spaces of the soul, demanding attention, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. Many who hear this message may already feel something stirring deep within them, a subtle yet undeniable shift that has been building beneath the surface of their everyday routine. Perhaps over the past few days, there has been an unusual weight in the chest, a persistent restlessness that makes sleep feel distant, or a strange sense that something important is about to happen, even though nothing visible has changed. These sensations can easily be misunderstood. The mind quickly labels them as anxiety, stress, or exhaustion, because those explanations feel familiar and manageable. Yet the message asks the listener to pause before accepting those assumptions, because what they are experiencing may not be emotional instability at all. Instead, it may be the early signal of a spiritual transition that is already unfolding around them. The pressure, restlessness, and sleeplessness experienced recently are therefore reframed in a completely different light. Rather than signs of internal chaos, they are presented as indicators of a shift occurring at a deeper level of awareness. When the spirit begins to recognize that something significant is approaching, the body often reacts before the conscious mind understands why. The chosen one may feel as if their inner world has become unusually sensitive, as though their intuition has been switched to a higher volume. Thoughts may move faster, emotions may feel sharper, and silence may carry a strange sense of anticipation. None of this means something is wrong. In fact, it may be the opposite. These sensations often appear when a person is standing on the edge of transformation, when the familiar patterns of the past are about to give way to a completely new chapter. The discomfort that accompanies this moment is not a warning of failure, but the tension that naturally occurs when an old identity begins to dissolve and a new one begins to form. At the center of this message is the declaration that time itself is accelerating. The waiting seasons that once seemed endless are beginning to compress into a much shorter window of change. What previously required years of effort, patience, and endurance may now begin to move forward with unexpected speed. This acceleration does not mean the past seasons were wasted. Every moment of waiting, every lesson learned in silence, every disappointment that shaped resilience has been part of a long preparation. But preparation and manifestation do not always arrive at the same pace. There are moments in life when the long years of planting suddenly collide with the moment of harvest. The message suggests that such a moment may now be approaching. The chosen one is stepping into a period where opportunities, insights, and breakthroughs can arrive far more quickly than they once did. The pace of events may feel unfamiliar, even overwhelming, because the internal mindset is still calibrated to the slower rhythm of the previous season. This is why the message emphasizes that the chosen one may still be mentally living in yesterday while tomorrow is already arriving. When someone spends years in a season defined by delay, struggle, or uncertainty, their mind naturally adapts to that environment. They learn to expect obstacles, to prepare for disappointment, and to move cautiously through life. Those habits once served a purpose. They helped the person survive difficult seasons and develop strength in the face of adversity. However, the mindset that protects someone during a season of survival can unintentionally block them during a season of expansion. If the mind continues to expect delay, it may struggle to recognize opportunity when it finally appears. If the heart continues to anticipate disappointment, it may hesitate when blessings begin to unfold. The message therefore calls for an immediate shift in perception, not because the past experiences were meaningless, but because the future now requires a different posture of readiness. The purpose of this message is to guide the listener through that shift. It is not simply a comforting speech designed to provide temporary motivation. Instead, it functions as an instruction manual for a critical moment of alignment. The chosen one is invited to upgrade their internal framework so that the opportunities approaching them can land safely and fully in their life. Just as an aircraft requires a clear runway before it can touch the ground, blessings often require mental and emotional space before they can manifest. If the runway is cluttered with doubt, fear, or the expectations of past disappointment, the arrival may be delayed. By adjusting the mindset, the listener begins to clear that runway, making room for the next chapter to unfold. For this reason, the listener is encouraged to remain present and attentive until the very end of the message. Every part of what follows is designed to function together as a complete activation protocol. Each insight builds upon the previous one, gradually guiding the chosen one from confusion to clarity, from tension to alignment, and from waiting to movement. Leaving the process unfinished may cause the deeper meaning to be missed. But staying present allows the message to do its work fully, helping the listener shift from the mindset of yesterday into the reality that is already beginning to arrive. In this moment of attention and openness, the chosen one stands at the threshold of a new season, one that no longer asks them to wait for the future but invites them to step forward and receive it. What many people initially interpret as strange pressure or emotional instability often carries a deeper meaning and understanding that the unusual sensations in the body and emotions are not random or psychological problems, becomes the first step in recognizing what is truly unfolding. There are moments in life when the internal landscape shifts before any external change becomes visible. During these moments, the body can feel unsettled. The mind may struggle to concentrate, and sleep may become strangely difficult. Yet these experiences are not always the symptoms of stress or exhaustion that modern culture so quickly labels them to be. Instead, they can be signals emerging from a deeper layer of awareness. A layer that is constantly scanning the horizon of possibility long before the conscious mind has the language to interpret what it senses. Many spiritual traditions have long recognized this phenomenon, the idea that transformation is often preceded by a period of internal disturbance. It is as though the soul begins to move before the personality understands that movement, creating a temporary friction between what is coming and what has been. This is why it becomes important to understand that the spirit can detect changes in destiny before the conscious mind understands them. The rational mind tends to operate through logic, memory, and visible evidence. It builds its expectations from what has already happened, from patterns that have repeated themselves over time. The spirit, however, functions differently. It does not rely solely on past experience. Instead, it carries a sensitivity to possibilities that have not yet become visible. When a shift begins to form in the unseen layers of life, the spirit often becomes aware of it first. This awareness can manifest as intuition, restlessness, heightened sensitivity, or an inexplicable sense that something important is approaching. To the analytical mind, such sensations can feel confusing because there is no immediate explanation. Yet the absence of explanation does not mean the sensation is meaningless. In fact, it may mean that the explanation simply has not arrived yet. The mind may still be looking backward for answers, while the spirit is already sensing the movement of what lies ahead. This early awareness frequently creates a tension that many people interpret as anxiety. Yet what is often labeled as anxiety may actually be the turbulence of a breakthrough approaching. Consider how an aircraft behaves when it encounters turbulence in the atmosphere. The turbulence itself does not mean the aircraft is in danger. It simply means the plane is moving through layers of air that are shifting in density and direction. In much the same way, the turbulence that appears within a person's emotional or physical state can indicate that their life is passing through a zone of transition. The familiar stability of the past is beginning to loosen, but the new stability of the future has not yet fully formed. In that in-between space, sensations intensify. Thoughts become louder, emotions feel sharper. The body may react with tension or restlessness because it senses movement that the conscious mind has not yet learned to trust. What appears chaotic is often simply the natural disturbance that occurs when a significant change is drawing near. Understanding this turbulence becomes even more important when recognizing that a large blessing may already be attempting to enter the listener's life, but cannot fully land yet. Just as an aircraft requires a clear runway before touching down, opportunities and breakthroughs often require an environment that is ready to receive them. If the internal landscape of a person's life is still shaped by the expectations of past seasons, the arrival of something new may feel overwhelming or unfamiliar. The blessing itself may already be present in the atmosphere of possibility, circling patiently, waiting for the moment when the conditions below become stable enough to support its arrival. This is not because the blessing is uncertain or fragile, but because growth requires alignment. When the inner world of a person is still anchored in old patterns of fear, doubt, or limitation, the new reality that is trying to emerge may feel too large to integrate. The blessing pauses not because it has been denied, but because it is waiting for the mind and spirit to prepare the space that will allow it to fully manifest. This idea leads naturally to the realization that the internal runway may still be cluttered with the mindset of the previous season. Every season of life leaves behind certain habits of thought and expectation. If someone has spent a long time navigating hardship, they may develop a mindset built around caution and survival. They learn to protect themselves from disappointment by lowering expectations. They learn to analyze every opportunity, carefully anticipating possible obstacles before they appear. These patterns are not weaknesses. They are adaptations that help the person endure difficult circumstances. However, when the season begins to change, those same protective patterns can become barriers to expansion. A mindset designed for survival may struggle to recognize abundance. A perspective shaped by delay may hesitate to trust acceleration. As a result, the internal runway becomes crowded with assumptions that once served a purpose but now stand in the way of something greater. Clearing that runway requires a shift in awareness, a willingness to examine the beliefs that were formed during earlier chapters of the journey. It involves recognizing that the conditions of the past do not necessarily define the possibilities of the present. Many people unknowingly carry the emotional architecture of old seasons into new ones. They expect the same obstacles, the same delays, and the same disappointments to repeat themselves. Yet life does not always operate in straight lines. Seasons change often more quickly than the mind expects. When a new season begins, the individual must learn to update their internal expectations to match the new reality that is emerging. This process can feel uncomfortable because it requires letting go of familiar mental structures. Even negative patterns can feel strangely safe when they have been part of someone's life for a long time. Releasing them can feel like stepping into unknown territory, even if that territory holds far greater possibilities. Within this process, the pressure that many people initially fear begins to reveal its true purpose. The pressure is not the warning of disaster, but a sign that something significant is arriving. Just as a seed experiences pressure before it breaks open and begins to grow, transformation often begins with an internal sensation of compression. The old identity is being asked to expand, but expansion requires movement. The tension between what has been and what is coming creates a moment of intensity that can feel overwhelming at first. Yet that intensity is often the very force that propels a person forward into the next stage of their development. Without pressure, growth would remain theoretical. Pressure forces movement. It pushes the individual beyond the boundaries of the identity they once believed was permanent. In this way, the strange sensations that accompany moments of transformation become part of a larger narrative of preparation. The restlessness is not simply discomfort. It is a signal that the inner world is adjusting to accommodate something larger. The heightened awareness is not merely distraction. It is a recalibration of perception that allows the individual to recognize opportunities they might previously have overlooked. Even the uncertainty that sometimes accompanies these moments can carry a hidden purpose, because uncertainty invites curiosity, and curiosity opens the door to discovery. What initially appears as instability may actually be the early stage of a powerful realignment taking place beneath the surface of everyday life. When the chosen one begins to see these sensations through this new lens, the entire experience changes. What once felt like a problem begins to reveal itself as preparation. The pressure becomes a messenger rather than an enemy. The restlessness becomes a signal rather than a symptom. Instead of resisting these sensations or attempting to silence them, the individual can begin to observe them with curiosity and patience. They may start asking different questions. What is shifting within me? What possibility might be approaching that my spirit already senses? What belief from the past may need to be released so that the future can fully arrive? These questions transform the experience from one of confusion into one of discovery. And as this discovery unfolds, the chosen one gradually realizes that the turbulence they are feeling is not a sign that they are losing control of their life, but evidence that their life is beginning to move into a new trajectory. The atmosphere around them is changing. The air currents that once kept them grounded are shifting, and the horizon ahead is opening in ways they may not yet fully comprehend. In that moment, the strange pressure that once felt unsettling begins to reveal itself as something far more meaningful. The early echo of a transformation that is already on its way. Understanding that we have entered a prophetic season of time acceleration requires stepping back for a moment and observing how life normally unfolds, because the message draws attention to a spiritual principle that has been written into Scripture for centuries, yet is rarely recognized in everyday experience. The message references Amos 9:13 to explain what happens when the traditional timeline begins to collapse, revealing a moment when divine timing interrupts the predictable rhythm of human expectations. In the verse, a remarkable image appears: the plowman overtaking the reaper, and the one who treads grapes overtaking the one who sows the seed. At first glance, this image may seem poetic or symbolic, but its meaning becomes powerful when understood in the context of how agriculture actually works. Farming follows a rhythm that is slow, patient, and deeply connected to the passage of time. Seeds are planted during one season. Then the farmer waits. Rain must fall. The soil must warm. Roots must grow unseen beneath the surface. Only after months of quiet development does the harvest appear. The farmer expects this delay because it is part of the natural order of growth. Yet the prophetic vision in Amos describes a moment when this delay disappears, when the rhythm of time itself seems to accelerate beyond the familiar patterns that people have always known. In ordinary circumstances, there is always a long gap between planting and harvesting, and this gap has shaped the way human beings think about effort, patience, and reward. Most people grow accustomed to the idea that progress must unfold slowly, that success requires long seasons of waiting, and that breakthroughs arrive only after years of persistence. This belief is not entirely wrong, because many seasons of life truly do require patient endurance. The preparation stage is where skills are developed, character is refined, and resilience is built. During those seasons, it can feel as though life is moving at an unbearably slow pace. The chosen one may work tirelessly toward a goal while seeing little visible progress. They may pray for guidance while hearing nothing but silence. They may carry dreams that seem distant and unreachable, wondering whether the effort they are investing will ever bear fruit. In such seasons, the delay becomes a teacher shaping the inner strength required to sustain the future that is still forming beneath the surface. However, what Amos describes is a moment when the normal gap between effort and reward collapses. And in this prophetic season, that gap begins to disappear in ways that can feel almost surreal. Imagine a farmer standing in a field after months of preparation, placing seeds carefully into the soil. The work is deliberate and patient, and the expectation is clear: the harvest will come later. But now imagine that as the farmer finishes planting the final rows, another worker arrives immediately behind him, ready to gather the fruit that has already grown. The plowman and the reaper now occupy the same field at the same time. The moment of preparation and the moment of reward overlap. The natural timeline that once separated them has suddenly compressed into a single unfolding event. This image is not meant to defy logic, but to illustrate a spiritual reality. There are moments when divine timing accelerates the outcomes of long seasons of preparation. When such acceleration begins, events that once seemed distant begin to move with unexpected speed, and the chosen one may find themselves entering situations that unfold far more quickly than they anticipated. Opportunities that once required years to appear may now arrive in a matter of weeks or even days. Connections that once seemed impossible may suddenly form. Doors that remained closed for long periods may begin to open one after another, creating a chain reaction of movement. At first, this rapid shift can feel disorienting. After spending so much time in seasons of waiting, the mind becomes conditioned to expect delay. When acceleration suddenly begins, it can feel as though reality itself is moving faster than the individual is prepared to handle. Yet this rapid movement does not mean the preparation was unnecessary. On the contrary, it is precisely because of the long seasons of preparation that acceleration becomes possible. The imagery of the plowman and the reaper helps explain this phenomenon, because it illustrates the overlap between preparation and reward that occurs during moments of divine acceleration. The plowman represents the season of effort, the period when seeds are planted and the future is cultivated through discipline and perseverance. The reaper represents the moment when those seeds finally produce fruit. Under normal circumstances, these two roles are separated by time. The plowman finishes his work long before the reaper ever arrives. Yet in the prophetic image described by Amos, these roles begin to operate simultaneously. Preparation and reward occur in the same moment, revealing that the unseen work of earlier seasons has already produced results that are ready to emerge. The seeds planted long ago have been quietly growing beneath the surface, and now the harvest appears so quickly that it seems almost miraculous. For the chosen one, this realization carries profound implications because it suggests that the effort invested during earlier seasons has not been forgotten or wasted. Every moment of perseverance, every lesson learned through hardship, and every act of faith during uncertain times has contributed to a reservoir of preparation that is now ready to produce visible outcomes. What once required years of effort can now happen suddenly, not because the laws of growth have been abandoned, but because the growth has already taken place out of sight. Just as seeds develop roots beneath the soil before breaking through the surface, many of the transformations that shape a person's destiny occur quietly and invisibly long before the world recognizes them. When the moment of emergence arrives, it may appear sudden to observers, but it is actually the result of a long and hidden process reaching its completion. This suddenness, however, can create a powerful sensation of friction within the chosen one's life, because the internal mindset may still be calibrated to the slower rhythm of the past season. The chosen one is therefore experiencing the friction of two seasons colliding. On one side stands the season of preparation, a time marked by patience, endurance, and gradual progress. On the other side stands the season of manifestation, where opportunities and results begin to appear with surprising speed. When these two seasons overlap, the mind may struggle to keep up with the pace of change. The individual may feel both excitement and uncertainty at the same time. Part of them celebrates the arrival of long-awaited breakthroughs, while another part wonders whether the rapid movement is real or sustainable. This inner tension is natural because the psychological habits formed during the waiting season do not disappear overnight. Yet the collision of these seasons also marks a turning point in the journey of the chosen one. It is the moment when the long night of preparation begins to give way to the first light of manifestation. The friction being felt is not a signal that something is wrong, but evidence that transformation is underway. The old rhythm of delay is gradually dissolving, making room for a new rhythm of acceleration. The seeds planted in faith are beginning to reveal their fruit. The lessons learned during quiet seasons are now becoming tools that support visible progress. In this moment, the chosen one stands at the intersection of past preparation and future possibility, witnessing the remarkable convergence of effort and reward that the prophetic vision described centuries ago. When the chosen one understands this principle, the rapid changes unfolding around them begin to make sense. What once felt chaotic now appears purposeful. The sudden opportunities are not random coincidences, but signs that the harvest season has begun. The speed of events is not a threat, but confirmation that the long seasons of waiting have finally reached their conclusion. The plowman is overtaking the reaper because the field has already been prepared, and the harvest that once seemed distant is now stepping into the present moment. In this prophetic season of time acceleration, the chosen one is invited to recognize that the timeline they once accepted as fixed is now shifting, opening the door for possibilities that once seemed far beyond reach to arrive far sooner than they ever imagined. As the message moves deeper into understanding transformation, it becomes necessary to explore the conflict between spirit and the survival brain, because this internal tension explains why moments of breakthrough can sometimes feel strangely uncomfortable, even when they carry the promise of something good. At the level of the spirit, expansion feels natural. The spirit is not designed to remain small or confined within the boundaries of past limitations. It is drawn toward growth, possibility, and discovery. The spirit instinctively recognizes opportunity and feels energized by the idea of stepping into a larger life. When a new door appears, the spirit often responds with curiosity and excitement, sensing that the opportunity may be connected to a deeper purpose. However, the biological brain operates according to a very different set of priorities. While the spirit seeks expansion, the brain is primarily concerned with safety. Its main function is to keep the body alive by avoiding danger, preserving energy, and maintaining stability within the environment. For the brain, unfamiliar situations often represent potential threats, even when those situations carry positive outcomes. As a result, when life begins to move into unfamiliar territory, the spirit may feel ready to move forward, while the brain begins to apply the brakes. This contrast becomes especially noticeable when rapid change triggers the survival instinct of the nervous system. Human beings are biologically wired to interpret sudden changes in their environment as signals that require caution. Throughout history, this instinct helped people survive unpredictable circumstances. When early humans encountered unfamiliar territory, their brains immediately entered a state of heightened awareness in order to scan for possible threats. That same neurological mechanism still exists today, even though most modern challenges are not life-threatening in the same way. When an opportunity suddenly appears that could significantly alter a person's life, the nervous system may respond as though something dangerous is happening. The body becomes alert. The mind begins analyzing every detail. Questions arise quickly. What if this fails? What if I am not ready? What if everything changes and I cannot handle it? These thoughts are not necessarily rational reflections of reality. They are echoes of the survival system trying to maintain control over unfamiliar circumstances. Because the nervous system reacts this way, the body itself may begin to show signs of resistance. The body may respond with tension, fear, exhaustion, or sudden doubt, even though the opportunity in front of the individual is something they once prayed for or worked hard to achieve. A person who has been waiting for a breakthrough may suddenly feel strangely tired when the breakthrough arrives. Someone who has long desired recognition may feel uncomfortable when attention finally turns toward them. A person who has been seeking financial stability may feel overwhelmed when a major opportunity presents itself. These reactions can feel confusing because they seem to contradict the person's own goals. The individual may wonder why they feel hesitant about something they once deeply desired. The answer often lies not in the spirit, but in the biological processes of the brain attempting to maintain familiarity. Familiar environments feel safe to the survival brain even when those environments are not ideal. Change, by contrast, introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty activates caution. Psychologists and behavioral researchers have described this phenomenon as the upper limit problem, a term used to explain why individuals sometimes feel uncomfortable when their lives begin to expand beyond the level they have become accustomed to. Every person develops an internal comfort zone that defines what feels normal in terms of success, happiness, and stability. When circumstances push someone beyond that familiar level, the brain interprets the expansion as a disruption of balance. The mind may begin generating doubts, distractions, or emotional turbulence in an unconscious attempt to return to the familiar baseline. This reaction does not mean the individual lacks ambition or faith. It simply means that the brain is trying to maintain equilibrium based on past experiences. For someone who has spent years navigating struggle or uncertainty, stability at a higher level may initially feel unfamiliar, even if it represents the fulfillment of long-held hopes. Because of this internal mechanism, people may unconsciously sabotage their own breakthroughs without realizing why they are doing so. The sabotage rarely appears in obvious ways. Instead, it often shows up through subtle behaviors that delay progress or create unnecessary complications. Someone may procrastinate when an important opportunity appears. Another person may overanalyze a situation until the moment of action passes. Others may create small conflicts in relationships or work environments that distract them from stepping fully into their potential. These actions are not usually intentional acts of self-destruction. Rather, they are unconscious attempts by the brain to restore a sense of familiarity. The survival system, noticing that life is expanding beyond what it previously understood, tries to slow the process down. It sends signals of doubt, fatigue, or hesitation in an effort to protect the individual from what it perceives as instability. For the chosen one, this realization becomes incredibly important because it reframes the entire experience of resistance. Many people assume that when obstacles appear during moments of growth, those obstacles must come from external forces. They may believe that circumstances, other people, or unseen opposition is blocking their progress. While external challenges certainly exist, Some of the most powerful barriers to transformation arise internally. The brain itself can become the gatekeeper that determines whether the individual moves forward or retreats into the comfort of the familiar past. Recognizing this dynamic allows the chosen one to approach the situation with greater clarity. Instead of interpreting every moment of doubt as a sign that the path is wrong, they can begin to see those doubts as signals from the survival system, adjusting to a new level of possibility, understanding. This conflict between spirit and survival brain helps the chosen one recognize that the resistance they are feeling is internal rather than external. This awareness alone can dramatically change the way they respond to moments of uncertainty. Instead of fighting against their own reactions or judging themselves for feeling hesitant, they can acknowledge the biological processes taking place within their nervous system. They can remind themselves that the brain is simply trying to protect them according to patterns developed during earlier seasons of life. By observing these reactions without immediately obeying them, the chosen one gains the ability to move forward, even when the survival system is sending cautious signals. The spirit can lead, while the brain gradually learns that the new territory is not dangerous, but transformative. Over time, as the chosen one continues stepping into opportunities that once felt intimidating, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. The unfamiliar gradually becomes familiar. The level of success, responsibility, or visibility that once triggered discomfort begins to feel natural. What previously seemed overwhelming becomes part of everyday life. This process mirrors the way muscles adapt during physical training. At first, new levels of effort create strain and fatigue, but as the body adjusts, the same movements become easier and more efficient. In the same way, the mind and nervous system learn to expand their comfort zone through repeated exposure to growth. When the chosen one embraces this process, they begin to see the tension they feel not as a sign of weakness, but as evidence of expansion. The spirit continues moving toward possibility, while the brain gradually learns that the new level of life is safe. Instead of retreating into old patterns, the chosen one develops the courage to remain present during moments of discomfort, trusting that the temporary friction is simply part of growth. The internal conflict slowly transforms into internal cooperation. The survival brain, once cautious and resistant, begins to support the very expansion it once feared. In this way, the journey forward becomes clearer. The resistance that once seemed mysterious reveals itself as a natural response from a system designed to protect life. By understanding this dynamic, the chosen one gains the wisdom to move forward without interpreting every hesitation as failure. They recognize that the spirit's desire for growth is not in conflict with their survival, but part of the evolution of their identity. And as this awareness deepens, the path ahead no longer appears blocked by invisible enemies. Instead, it becomes a process of aligning the mind, body, and spirit, so that the breakthrough already approaching can finally be received with confidence and stability. As the journey continues, the message begins to uncover another layer of understanding, one that explains why guidance from the divine can sometimes feel distant or difficult to recognize. This realization emerges from what can be described as the frequency gap between the human mind and divine guidance, a concept that has existed within spiritual teachings for centuries, but is often misunderstood when translated into everyday life. Scripture has long explained that God's ways are higher than human ways, and that divine understanding exceeds human comprehension. Many people interpret this statement simply as a reminder that God is wiser or more powerful than human beings. While that interpretation carries truth, it only captures part of the meaning. The deeper insight hidden within this statement is that divine wisdom often operates from a completely different level of perception. It is not merely a difference in intelligence or authority, but a difference in the way reality itself is experienced and interpreted. When Scripture describes God's ways as higher, it invites the listener to imagine a perspective that exists beyond the limitations of ordinary human thinking. A perspective that sees patterns, possibilities, and outcomes long before they become visible within the physical world. Understanding this difference becomes clearer when it is interpreted through the idea of frequency. Just as sound waves, radio signals, and light operate at different frequencies within the natural world, human thought and spiritual awareness can also be understood as operating within different energetic patterns of perception. A radio tuned to one station cannot hear the broadcast of another station, even though both signals are present in the same space. The difference lies not in the presence of the signal, but in the ability of the receiver to tune itself to the correct frequency. In the same way, divine communication does not necessarily disappear simply because human beings fail to perceive it. Rather, the communication may exist at a level of awareness that the ordinary human mind has not yet learned to receive. When the mind is operating within one pattern of thought, it may completely miss messages that are being transmitted at another level of consciousness. Divine communication, according to this understanding, operates on a higher spiritual frequency that carries clarity, purpose, and direction beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Throughout spiritual history, there are countless accounts of individuals who suddenly received insight, guidance, or revelation during moments of stillness, prayer, or deep reflection. These moments often occur not during times of intense mental activity, but during times when the mind becomes quiet enough to perceive something greater than its own thoughts. The prophets, mystics, and visionaries described in sacred texts frequently entered states of contemplation or solitude before receiving guidance that shaped the course of their lives. These experiences suggest that divine communication does not necessarily force its way into human awareness through noise or urgency. Instead, it often emerges within a state of alignment, where the individual becomes receptive to a level of perception that transcends ordinary thinking. However, the modern human mind rarely remains in such a receptive state for very long. Human minds often remain locked in a survival frequency due to stress pressure and the lingering effects of past experiences. The world many people inhabit today moves at a relentless pace filled with constant stimulation, responsibility, and uncertainty. News cycles deliver alarming information every hour. Financial pressures demand constant attention. Social environments create expectations that must be managed carefully. Over time, these conditions train the mind to operate in a heightened state of alertness. The brain becomes accustomed to scanning the environment for potential problems that require immediate action. This mode of thinking is highly effective for solving practical challenges, but it is not always conducive to perceiving deeper guidance. When the mind is continuously focused on survival, it becomes less sensitive to subtle signals that operate beyond the immediate concerns of daily life. Stress and trauma can further reinforce this survival frequency by shaping the way the brain interprets new experiences. When someone has lived through seasons of hardship, their nervous system often becomes conditioned to expect difficulty. The mind learns to anticipate obstacles even in situations where opportunity might be present. This protective mechanism is valuable in certain circumstances because it helps individuals avoid repeating painful experiences. Yet it can also create a filter through which every situation is interpreted as a potential threat. When the brain operates within this constant state of vigilance, its capacity to perceive inspiration, intuition, or divine prompting becomes limited. The mind is simply too occupied with scanning for danger to notice signals that operate on a different level of awareness. This explains why a mind that is tuned to fear cannot clearly detect divine guidance even when that guidance is present. Fear narrows perception. It causes the mind to focus exclusively on immediate risks and uncertainties. The imagination becomes dominated by worst-case scenarios, and the future appears filled with obstacles rather than possibilities. In such a state, even a promising opportunity may appear intimidating. The mind may interpret growth as danger because growth often involves stepping into unfamiliar territory. When fear controls the internal dialogue, the subtle voice of intuition becomes difficult to hear. Guidance that might otherwise feel clear and reassuring becomes drowned out by the louder noise of worry and doubt. Yet the presence of this noise does not mean divine guidance has disappeared. The signal remains present, just as radio waves continue to travel through the air, whether or not a receiver is tuned to the correct station. What is required in this situation is not the creation of a new signal, but the adjustment of the receiver. Alignment requires shifting the internal frequency of the mind so that it becomes capable of recognizing what has always been there. This shift does not necessarily require abandoning practical thinking or ignoring real challenges. Instead, it involves creating moments in which the mind steps out of constant survival mode and enters a state of openness and awareness. Practices such as reflection, prayer, meditation, or quiet contemplation allow the mind to move away from the noise of immediate concerns and reconnect with a deeper level of perception. When the mind enters this calmer state, something remarkable begins to happen. Thoughts slow down, allowing intuition to surface more clearly. Instead of reacting automatically to every stimulus, the individual becomes capable of observing their inner world with greater clarity. Ideas that once seemed distant may suddenly appear meaningful. Patterns that were previously invisible begin to reveal themselves. In this environment, divine guidance does not need to shout in order to be heard. It can emerge gently, often through subtle impressions, quiet realizations, or moments of unexpected clarity that arrive without force or pressure. For the chosen one, learning to shift this internal frequency becomes an essential part of stepping into the season of acceleration described earlier. When life begins to move rapidly and opportunities appear with surprising speed, the ability to perceive guidance becomes even more important. Without alignment, the individual may feel overwhelmed by the pace of change and struggle to discern which opportunities truly belong to their path. But when the mind is tuned to the frequency of clarity rather than fear, each step becomes easier to recognize. Decisions that once felt confusing begin to make sense. The chosen one begins to notice that certain opportunities align naturally with their purpose, while others quietly fade away. Over time, this alignment creates a new relationship between the mind and the spirit. The survival brain no longer dominates every decision with fear-based analysis. Instead, it begins to cooperate with the deeper wisdom that emerges from spiritual awareness. The mind continues to evaluate practical details, but it does so from a place of stability rather than anxiety. The spirit provides direction, and the mind provides structure for implementing that direction within the physical world. Together, they form a balanced system that allows the individual to navigate life with both insight and discernment. In this way, the frequency gap that once separated human perception from divine guidance gradually begins to close. The chosen one learns that the voice of guidance was never absent. It simply required a different state of awareness to be perceived clearly. As the internal frequency shifts away from fear and toward openness, the once distant signal becomes unmistakable. What once seemed like silence transforms into a quiet yet steady presence guiding each step forward. And in that moment, the chosen one realizes that alignment was never about forcing answers to appear, but about creating the inner stillness necessary to recognize the wisdom that has been waiting patiently all along. As the journey continues, the message begins to point toward a practical pathway for bridging the gap between the survival-driven mind and the deeper guidance that the spirit is capable of receiving. And this pathway can be understood through the concept of returning to the receptive theta state. Modern neuroscience has revealed that the human brain operates through several patterns of electrical activity, often referred to as brainwave states. These states reflect how the mind processes information and responds to the environment at any given moment. Among the most widely discussed are beta and theta, two frequencies that illustrate the contrast between everyday mental activity and deeper states of awareness. Understanding the difference between these states becomes essential for the chosen one who is learning how to move from a mindset dominated by stress and urgency into a mindset capable of receiving insight and spiritual clarity. The brain operates in different states, such as beta, which is associated with alertness and analytical thinking, and theta, which is associated with calm receptivity and inner awareness. Both states serve important functions in human life, but they influence perception in very different ways. Beta is the state most people inhabit during the majority of their waking hours, and it plays a vital role in helping individuals navigate daily responsibilities. When the brain operates in beta, it is actively analyzing information, solving problems, and responding to external stimuli. This is the state that allows someone to complete tasks, make decisions, and remain attentive to their environment. Without beta, ordinary life would become difficult to manage because the mind would lack the sharp focus required for practical action. However, while beta is extremely useful for managing daily tasks, it often blocks deeper intuition because it keeps the mind locked into constant analysis and evaluation. When the brain remains in a high beta state for extended periods, it tends to generate rapid streams of thoughts that compete for attention. The mind becomes busy jumping from one concern to another, reviewing past experiences while simultaneously trying to predict future outcomes. In this environment of constant mental activity, subtle insights can easily be overlooked because the mind is too occupied with its own noise to perceive the quieter signals that arise from deeper awareness. Theta, by contrast, represents a completely different mental environment, one that is characterized by calmness, openness, and receptivity. Theta is a slower brainwave state associated with creativity, intuition, and spiritual awareness. When the brain shifts into theta, the constant chatter of analytical thinking begins to quiet, allowing deeper layers of perception to become accessible. This state is often described as a bridge between conscious thought and subconscious awareness, a place where imagination and insight flow more freely. In theta, the mind becomes less focused on controlling every detail of the environment and more open to observing patterns and possibilities that might otherwise remain hidden. Artists, inventors, and visionaries often report experiencing moments of inspiration during states that resemble theta, because the mind is relaxed enough to allow new ideas to emerge naturally rather than forcing them through deliberate analysis. Interestingly, this receptive state is not something mysterious or unreachable for most people, because theta naturally occurs during specific moments in the daily rhythm of human consciousness. The brain enters theta just before sleep and again during the moments immediately after waking. These transitional periods are sometimes described as the borderland between the waking world and the dreaming world. During these moments, the mind is not yet fully engaged with the demands of daily life, but it is no longer completely immersed in sleep. Thoughts may appear as vivid images or intuitive impressions rather than structured sentences. Solutions to problems sometimes emerge unexpectedly during these moments because the mind is temporarily freed from the rigid patterns of logical thinking. Many people have experienced the phenomenon of suddenly understanding a problem, or receiving a creative idea while lying quietly in bed before falling asleep or shortly after waking in the morning. These experiences provide a glimpse of the natural power of the theta state. Children provide perhaps the clearest example of what it looks like to live closer to this receptive frequency of awareness. During the early years of life, the human brain spends far more time operating in slower brainwave states such as theta. This is one of the reasons children possess such vivid imaginations and remarkable learning capacity. Their minds are not yet burdened by the layers of stress, expectation, and skepticism that often accumulate during adulthood. As a result, they approach the world with curiosity and openness rather than constant analysis. They can absorb new information quickly because their minds remain flexible and receptive. They imagine possibilities without immediately dismissing them as unrealistic. This natural closeness to the theta state allows children to explore ideas, freely forming connections and insights that adults sometimes struggle to perceive. As individuals grow older, however, the demands of life gradually train the brain to remain in beta for longer periods. Responsibilities increase, schedules become more structured, and concerns about performance or security begin to dominate attention. Over time, the mind becomes conditioned to remain in a constant state of alertness, focusing primarily on solving immediate problems. While this shift supports productivity, it also reduces the amount of time the brain spends in the receptive states where intuition and inspiration flourish. The chosen one who is seeking clarity and guidance must therefore learn to intentionally reconnect with this quieter mode of awareness. Entering the theta state does not require abandoning practical thinking or withdrawing from everyday responsibilities. Instead, it involves creating intentional moments of stillness where the mind is allowed to slow down and release its constant need for control. Practices such as deep reflection, meditation, prayer, or simply sitting quietly without distraction can help guide the brain back toward this receptive frequency. When the mind relaxes into theta, the individual often discovers that insights begin to surface naturally. Problems that once seemed complex may reveal simple solutions. Decisions that once felt confusing may suddenly appear obvious. Guidance that once seemed distant may begin to feel present and accessible. For the chosen one navigating a season of acceleration and transformation, this shift into a receptive mental state becomes particularly powerful. When the mind is no longer dominated by stress and urgency, it becomes capable of recognizing the subtle signals that guide each step forward. The individual begins to perceive patterns and opportunities that might otherwise remain hidden. Instead of forcing answers through constant analysis, they learn to allow clarity to emerge from within. In this way, returning to the receptive theta state becomes more than a neurological process. It becomes a spiritual alignment, a way of preparing the mind to receive wisdom, creativity, and direction with greater ease as the next chapter of life continues to unfold. As the message approaches a moment of practical application, it becomes clear that insight alone is not enough to activate transformation. Understanding spiritual acceleration and recognizing the internal shifts taking place are important, but alignment also requires intentional action. For this reason, the message introduces a practical framework designed to help the chosen one move from awareness into readiness. This framework can be understood as a three-step protocol to prepare for breakthrough, a simple yet powerful sequence of actions that align the physical environment, the spoken word, and the internal state of the mind. Rather than offering abstract concepts alone, the message presents a concrete action plan for the next 24 hours, emphasizing that the coming period is not just another ordinary stretch of time. It is a window in which preparation and manifestation may begin to overlap, a moment where small, intentional actions can help create the conditions necessary for the next stage of life to arrive with clarity rather than confusion. The first movement within this protocol begins with something surprisingly simple yet deeply symbolic: a physical purge that starts by cleaning the entrance of the home or workspace. At first glance, this step might appear ordinary, even mundane. Cleaning is something people do regularly as part of daily life, and it may seem unrelated to spiritual transformation. Yet physical spaces often mirror the internal state of the mind. Over time, environments accumulate objects, clutter, and remnants of past activities that quietly shape the atmosphere of the space. Piles of unused items, disorganized surfaces, and neglected corners can create a subtle sense of stagnation that affects how a person thinks and feels within that environment. By intentionally cleaning the entryway of the place where one lives or works, the chosen one performs more than a practical task. They engage in a symbolic act that represents preparation for something new. The entrance of a space carries particular significance because it is the threshold where the outside world meets the private environment of the individual. Clearing this area sends a physical message that the space is ready to receive what is approaching. This act of clearing the entrance can therefore be understood as preparing a runway for incoming blessings. Just as an aircraft requires a clear landing strip before touching the ground, opportunities often require a prepared environment before they can fully manifest. When the chosen one removes clutter, organizes their surroundings, and refreshes the atmosphere of their space, they are performing an outward expression of an inward shift. The environment begins to reflect a posture of readiness rather than hesitation. This does not mean that success depends on physical cleaning alone, but the symbolic power of the action helps align intention with reality. As the chosen one clears away the remnants of the past season, they also begin releasing the psychological weight associated with those remnants. The space becomes lighter, more open, and more capable of supporting the movement that is about to unfold. Once the physical environment has been prepared, the protocol moves into a more subtle, yet equally powerful step: strategic silence. In a world where communication happens constantly through conversations, messages, and social media, silence can feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. Yet the message emphasizes that not every moment of transformation should be announced or explained to others immediately. Strategic silence means intentionally avoiding negative conversations, unnecessary explanations, or the influence of skeptical voices during this critical window of preparation. When individuals share their plans too quickly, they sometimes expose their vision to doubt before it has had time to develop strength. Well-meaning friends or acquaintances may question the possibility of change, offering opinions that unintentionally weaken the confidence required to move forward. Strategic silence protects the emerging breakthrough from this kind of interference. Silence in this context acts as a protective shield around the intention that is forming within the chosen one. Words carry power not only because they communicate ideas, but because they shape the way those ideas are perceived internally and externally. When a person repeatedly speaks about uncertainty or fear, those words reinforce the emotional state associated with them. By contrast, choosing silence allows the inner vision to mature without being diluted by external commentary. During this period, the chosen one is encouraged to listen more than they speak, to observe rather than explain, and to direct their energy inward rather than dispersing it outward through unnecessary conversation. In doing so, they create a mental environment where focus and clarity can deepen. With the external environment prepared and the spoken word guarded through silence, the protocol then arrives at its final and perhaps most transformative step: frequency anchoring. This step involves intentionally entering a calm mental state before sleep, allowing the mind to settle into a receptive mode rather than remaining trapped in the stress-driven patterns of the day. The moments before sleep represent one of the most influential periods for shaping the subconscious mind, because the brain gradually shifts away from analytical thinking and moves closer to the receptive frequencies discussed earlier. If this moment is filled with noise, worry, or endless scrolling through stressful information, the mind carries those patterns into the deeper layers of consciousness. But when the chosen one deliberately enters a state of calm reflection before sleep, they anchor their awareness in a frequency that supports clarity and guidance. Frequency anchoring may take many forms depending on the individual. Some people may choose to spend a few minutes in quiet prayer or meditation, allowing their thoughts to settle naturally. Others may reflect on gratitude or visualize the direction they believe their life is moving toward. The specific method matters less than the intention behind it, creating a mental environment that is calm, receptive, and open to insight. In this state, the mind becomes capable of processing experiences in a way that promotes alignment rather than confusion. Ideas that felt tangled during the day may begin to untangle themselves. Questions that once seemed overwhelming may reveal simple answers during the quiet moments of reflection. By anchoring the mind in this calm frequency before sleep, the chosen one prepares themselves to receive guidance and align with the accelerated season unfolding around them. The subconscious mind continues working throughout the night, organizing thoughts and processing information beyond the reach of conscious awareness. When the mind enters sleep from a place of calm rather than stress, it becomes more capable of integrating insight and clarity that can influence decisions the following day. The next morning may bring a renewed sense of direction, a fresh perspective on opportunities, or a quiet confidence about the steps that should be taken next. Taken together, these three steps form a sequence that connects the physical world, the spoken word, and the internal state of the mind into a unified preparation for breakthrough. The physical purge clears the external environment, signaling readiness. Strategic silence protects the vision from unnecessary interference. Frequency anchoring aligns the internal world with the calm awareness required to perceive guidance. Each step reinforces the others, creating a powerful alignment between intention and action. Through this simple yet intentional process, the chosen one begins to move from anticipation into preparation, positioning themselves to receive the opportunities that the accelerating season is beginning to reveal. As the journey moves toward its final turning point, the message begins to focus on what it truly means to cross the threshold of the promised opportunity, because every season of preparation eventually leads to a moment when action must replace waiting. This moment often arrives quietly, sometimes disguised as a simple decision or an unexpected opening that appears in the ordinary flow of life. Yet despite its simplicity, stepping into that opportunity can feel surprisingly intimidating. Fear and doubt often appear precisely when someone approaches their destiny, not because the opportunity is wrong, but because the mind recognizes that the next step will lead beyond the boundaries of the life they have known so far. The chosen one may suddenly hear internal questions that were silent during the earlier seasons of waiting. Am I truly ready for this? What if I fail after coming this far? What if the responsibility is greater than I expected? These questions can feel unsettling, yet they are not necessarily signs that the path is incorrect. More often, they are evidence that the moment of transformation has arrived, and the mind is adjusting to the weight of what lies ahead. To understand this experience more clearly, the message draws upon a powerful example found in the story of the Israelite spies, which illustrates the danger of what can be described as a grasshopper mindset. In that account, the people of Israel had already been promised a land prepared for their future. The promise had been spoken, the journey had begun, and the destination was within reach. When the spies were sent to explore the land, they returned with reports that confirmed its abundance and potential. Yet despite this confirmation, many of them focused not on the promise but on the obstacles they perceived. They described the inhabitants of the land as giants and compared themselves to grasshoppers in their own eyes. What is most striking about this moment is that the limitation they experienced did not originate in the land itself. The opportunity remained exactly as it had been promised. The barrier emerged from their perception of themselves. They saw themselves as small despite the promise already being given, and that perception shaped their ability to step forward. This example reveals an important truth about human experience. Self-perception can shape how opportunities are experienced. Two individuals may stand before the same open door, yet their internal beliefs determine whether they walk through it with confidence or hesitation. If someone views themselves through a lens of limitation, they may interpret opportunity as danger or pressure rather than possibility. The mind begins to magnify every potential obstacle while minimizing the strength and preparation that already exist within the individual. In this way, the grasshopper mindset becomes less about external circumstances and more about the internal narrative a person carries about who they are and what they are capable of becoming. For the chosen one standing at the edge of a new season, this realization carries tremendous significance. The invitation before them may represent the fulfillment of prayers, the reward for years of preparation, or the beginning of a calling that has been quietly forming throughout their life. Yet the mind may still attempt to measure the opportunity using the limitations of the past. This is why the chosen one must refuse to see themselves through a lens of limitation. The preparation of previous seasons has already expanded their capacity in ways they may not fully recognize yet. The challenges they overcame were not random difficulties but experiences that strengthened the foundation required for the moment now unfolding. When the chosen one remembers this truth, the narrative of smallness begins to dissolve, replaced by the awareness that they have been shaped precisely for the opportunity now appearing before them. In this context, fear takes on a new meaning. Fear does not necessarily mean the opportunity is wrong. It often means growth is required. Every new level of responsibility introduces unfamiliar territory, and unfamiliar territory naturally produces caution within the mind. This reaction does not indicate that the chosen one should retreat. Instead, it signals that the individual is expanding beyond the limits of their previous identity. Just as muscles grow stronger through resistance, personal growth often occurs when a person moves through moments that initially feel uncomfortable. The trembling that appears when standing before a great opportunity is not a sign of weakness, but evidence that the moment carries significance. Standing at the door of destiny therefore produces a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, because the responsibility connected to that moment is greater than anything that came before it. Yet it is precisely this responsibility that reveals the importance of the step being taken. The chosen one does not cross this threshold alone. The same guidance that led them through seasons of preparation continues to guide them as they step into manifestation. What once seemed distant now stands within reach, waiting not for perfection, but for courage. And in that moment of decision, when fear and faith stand side by side, the chosen one discovers that destiny does not require the absence of fear. It requires the willingness to move forward, despite it trusting that every step taken in faith brings the promise closer to becoming reality. As the message reaches its final movement, it becomes clear that the conclusion is not merely a summary of ideas, but a moment of activation, a turning point where understanding must transform into decision. This is why the closing reflection can be understood as the declaration that activates the new season. a moment where the chosen one recognizes that they are no longer standing on the sidelines of their own life, but stepping directly into the center of their unfolding destiny. Throughout the journey described in the message, the chosen one has been guided through layers of awareness, from recognizing the strange internal pressure of transformation to understanding the acceleration of time, the conflict within the mind, and the alignment required to receive divine guidance. Now the final truth emerges clearly. The chosen one is not a passive observer waiting for life to happen. They are an active participant in the very process that is shaping their future. Destiny is not something that unfolds independently of their response. It responds to their willingness to step forward to align their actions with the opportunities that have been quietly forming around them. With this realization comes the understanding that the season of waiting is ending and a new phase of movement is beginning. The long periods of preparation, reflection, and endurance were never meant to last forever. They were necessary stages that built the foundation required for what comes next. During those seasons, the chosen one learned patience, resilience, and faith in moments when visible progress seemed distant. But preparation is not the final destination. Preparation exists so that when the moment of movement arrives, the individual is ready to respond. Now that moment stands before them. The quiet years of planting are giving way to the visible season of harvest. What once seemed distant is now approaching with increasing clarity, inviting the chosen one to move forward rather than remain in the familiar patterns of delay. Yet stepping into this new season requires more than awareness. It requires willingness. The accelerated timeline described throughout the message moves quickly, and opportunities rarely wait indefinitely for someone to decide whether they are ready. When the call to move appears, hesitation can cause the moment to pass unnoticed. This is why the chosen one is encouraged to cultivate a posture of readiness, a mindset that recognizes opportunity not as an interruption, but as an invitation. Readiness does not mean having every answer or every detail perfectly planned. Instead, it means maintaining a heart that is willing to respond when direction becomes clear. The courage to move forward often begins with a simple inner decision to trust the process that has been unfolding all along. In this moment, the declaration of readiness becomes the final step of alignment. A declaration is more than words spoken into the air. It is a commitment that shapes the direction of future actions. When the chosen one declares that they are ready, they shift from anticipation into participation. The statement becomes a bridge between intention and reality. It marks the point where internal preparation transforms into outward movement. Such a declaration does not eliminate every challenge that may appear along the way, but it establishes the inner posture required to face those challenges with confidence rather than hesitation. As this declaration takes root, another important truth becomes clear: the past season of delay must no longer define the future. Many individuals carry the emotional weight of earlier seasons long after those seasons have ended. They continue to measure new opportunities using the limitations that once surrounded them. But transformation requires releasing the narrative of the past so that the possibilities of the present can be fully recognized. The chosen one must allow the story of delay to remain part of their history without allowing it to dictate the shape of what comes next. The preparation of yesterday served its purpose, and now it becomes the strength that supports the next chapter. By accepting the call placed before them, the chosen one steps into a timeline that has already begun unfolding. The opportunities, insights, and connections appearing in their life are not random occurrences. They are signals that the new season is already in motion. When the chosen one responds with courage and clarity, they begin to move in harmony with this unfolding process rather than resisting it. Each step forward reveals the next, and the path that once seemed uncertain gradually becomes visible through action and trust. The message therefore closes not with finality, but with encouragement, reminding the chosen one that the journey ahead is one of discovery, growth, and unfolding purpose. The invitation is simple yet powerful: move forward confidently into the destiny that is already taking shape around you. Trust that the preparation of the past has equipped you for the opportunities of the present. Allow the declaration of readiness to guide your steps, and as you move, the horizon that once appeared distant will begin to draw closer with every step taken in faith.